Hi and welcome. I'm Laura Busby, Interpretive Specialist with Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission. I'm so glad you're here today. I'd like to start out by thanking the Ellensburg Public Library for inviting me to join them in their summer series, Imagine Your Story, with a focus on adventure. We're at Olmstead Place Historical State Park today, which was donated in 1968 by the Olmstead Smith family to the parks for you, so that people could come here to learn about Kittitas homesteaders and their history here in the valley. Our program today is Homesteader Survival, eke out a living from the land. Eke is an English word which fits well with the Olmsteads because they were from English immigrants. It means to make a living with great difficulty. Today, we will follow colonizers on their challenging adventure to come homestead in Kittitas Valley. We'll explore the natural resources, especially plants, that they utilized to survive. And we'll see how these pioneers completely changed this landscape over time. Can you put yourself into the place of these hardworking people in this dangerous lifestyle? Can you imagine what that might have been like? Let's jump into their story and find out more about it. They were coming to the valley in order to stake a homestead claim. The government was giving away land almost for free as long as the claimee made some improvements within a certain period of time. So the homesteaders wanted to find the best spot, not just so they could survive, but in order to thrive. Getting here was really a chore. You had to pack really light because everything had to go on horseback. And that meant you had to gather things you needed or find things to use for what you needed along the way. Going a couple of weeks through the mountains must have been a real ordeal. It sounds like fun to me to go camping through the mountains for a while, but I bet the homesteaders didn't look at it that way. As they traveled, they harvested food from the landscape. They also used plants for many other necessary chores. We're over along the creek, and I found some horsetails or scouring rush. Let's take a closer look. This is one of the kinds of scouring rush that we have in this area. It's really branchy. But if you look closely, you can see the stem and how that stem is segmented. And the stem is actually hollow in here, but it's got a lot of silica in it. So that silica makes it really tough and rough. Early settlers and pioneers would have used this plant. They would have scrunched it all up and with a bunch of it and used it to scrub pots and things like that because that silica is so tough. As the family rode down into the valley, they were watching for a site that would provide all the resources that they would need, including food sources, usable land, and water. Water is critical for survival. Without it, we can only last a couple days. This creek, Coleman Creek, is the creek the family was able to use, but not only did it provide water for their daily needs, it also drew in game and provided a diversity of plants for them to use as well. Water was important for game, but it was also critical for the cattle these ranchers wanted to raise and the crops they wanted to grow in order to make a living. This was shrub steppe, which is a dry, harsh ecosystem, really difficult climate to live in. Fortunately, this valley had a lot of bunch grass, which was great for raising cattle. The Olmsteads chose this site in these challenging sagelands along this permanent year-round stream to build their homestead and their ranch. The pioneers found a home. Clarita Olmstead Smith was the third generation the granddaughter of the original homesteaders. She wrote a book, The Trail Leads West, about her family and their immigration to this location. In her book, she writes a great little piece about how Daniel Boone went to Kentucky, found everything he needed, and was going to go back and get Ma and the kids. This is a brand new sign that you will see soon on the trail here at Olmstead Place Historical State Park. To homestead in this challenging climate, the Olmsteads needed a place to live. Unfortunately, there weren't the right kind of trees right here in this area. They were mostly willows along the creek, not good for cabin construction. So the Olmsteads had to hitch up a horse and wagon and ride about 7 miles over to the Yakima River Canyon in order to find the right trees. There were some nice cottonwood poplars over there that they could cut down that were straight and tall and would provide the wood that they would need for this cabin. So they went over there, they cut those trees down using tools, hand tools, that they had carried with them on their journey. And then they brought those logs back over here and were able to construct this cabin in about 1875, 1876. So, wow, can you imagine doing all that work? It must have been an incredible hard job. I sure can't. Building a home was only one task the Olmsteads had to do. They also needed to get food. In order to do that, they needed to prepare a bed for a garden and plant an orchard. Preparing a garden bed is a lot of work. It requires removing rocks and tilling the soil, making that all ready for the seeds to go in, and then nurturing them so that they could grow into fruits and vegetables for the table. Planting an orchard was another big job and required digging holes, and really was an investment in the future because you weren't going to bother to do that unless you were going to stay a while, because fruit trees don't produce for many years after you plant those babies. Behind me, we see an apple tree that Samuel and Sarah Olmstead planted in approximately 1876. So this tree is more than 140 years old. You can see it's still producing fruit. Wow, this little apple smells really good. It's a little mushy. It might not taste as good as it smells. Before they could grow their own garden, homesteaders would have had to buy or trade for the items that they needed and scavenge whatever they could from the land. Can you imagine harvesting and making from scratch all of your own food? Next time you go to the grocery store, think about all of the ingredients that are in your cart and where they're from and what it would be like to try to collect them all on your own. The first gardens would have included food plants from seeds they brought and what they could get from neighbors. Some of those plants are no longer used but have gone wild in our current landscape. There are many examples, but let's take a look at one, the dandelion. Dandelions have been used for over 1,000 years as food and medicine. They probably came over on the Mayflower as an important garden plant. The entire plant is edible and contains more nutrients than many vegetables we covet today. Enjoy your dandelions in your yard. They really are a valuable resource. While they probably seem like a luxury, flower gardens were actually very important. Not only did they lift the spirits for the pioneers, but they also provided pollinators for the vegetable gardens and the orchards. Homesteaders required many different plants for a great variety of uses. These bunch grasses were used for fodder for their cattle. They also needed to get those poplar logs in order to build their cabin, as you see here. Food was one of the critical things that they frequently were able to gather from the surrounding lands. These golden currants were really valuable as jam that they could make from the berries. Bedstraw was another interesting plant that they used to stuff their mattresses, hence the name. It's really sticky. It has lots of little hairs if you notice up close. You've probably gotten these seeds caught in your socks in the past, or maybe just on your pants. They're really hairy, and they catch very easily on your clothes. Today's landscape reflects Kittitas Valley immigrant history. This area was all shrub steppe ecosystem, but it has been significantly changed by agricultural pursuits of pioneers and early settlers, and even by people today. Finding the right home site and making a living on this land was a big challenge for early settlers. They utilized the local resources, the water, the land, the plants, and the wildlife in order to survive and to thrive. With their success, they changed the landscape through agriculture, first with cattle and later with growing grain and hay. This adventure must have been a really big challenge. As you drive around our area or explore in the Ellensburg area, think about those early pioneers and what it might have looked like for them and the adventures and challenges they faced. Could you do it? Learn more about Ellensburg area history at the Ellensburg Public Library and visit the Kittitas County Historical Museum. Come to Olmstead Place Historical State Park and learn about the Olmstead family and their homesteader history here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We look forward to seeing you here at the park.